The late afternoon sun streamed through the wide windows of the Naval Special Warfare Command Center, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floor. The air inside the sprawling facility was cool, a sharp contrast to the oppressive heat of the California desert just outside the gates. In a quiet corner of the administrative wing, a woman moved with methodical precision, stacking folders and clearing the clutter from a temporary desk. Her name was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Jenkins, and she was counting down the final hours of a 2-week evaluation tour that had been, in her opinion, utterly unremarkable. At 34, Sarah had already lived a life that most in the military community found hard to categorize. She was tall, with a lean frame built not just from hours in the gym, but from a lifetime of carrying heavy packs across rugged terrain. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, and her eyes, a sharp shade of hazel, missed nothing as she tidied the workspace. To the casual observer, she looked like any other staff officer, efficient, quiet, and eager to get back to her unit. But the small insignia on her collar told a different story. She was an operator, one of a handful of women who had successfully navigated the treacherous waters of naval special warfare. She wasn't a SEAL in the traditional sense. The teams were still officially closed to women in combat roles during her early years, but she was a special operations chief with a unique skill set that had made her indispensable to the teams she supported. She was a sniper. I trained by the best the Navy had to offer, and she had the combat deployment patches to prove it. Her expertise lay in a niche area, extreme long-range shooting in mountainous terrain. While the SEALs were masters of the 800-meter shot, Sarah had spent years studying the arcane science of sending bullets a mile or more, accounting for the Earth's curvature, the Coriolis effect, and the fickle winds that danced across valleys. She had been loaned out to various squadrons as a technical advisor, but she always remained an outsider looking in. The men she advised respected her, but she was never truly one of them. As she reached to grab a stray pen that had rolled under the desk, she heard the heavy footfalls of a pair of combat boots approaching. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. The confident, the measured stride was unmistakable. "Leaving so soon, Jenkins? I thought you liked our hospitality." Sarah straightened up and turned to face Commander Marcus Thorne. He was the epitome of a SEAL sniper commander, broad-shouldered with a chiseled jaw and eyes the color of slate that seemed to bore right through you. He was in his early 40s, with a shaved head and a thick beard just starting to show flecks of gray. His reputation preceded him. With over 20 years of service and more high-value target kills than anyone cared to count, Thorne was a living legend in the community. He commanded the elite sniper cell responsible for training the next generation of shooters. "Commander?" Sarah nodded, her tone polite but distant. "Just finishing up. My report is on your desk. I think the new data on the 300 Norma mag at altitude will help the guys heading to the Hindu Kush." Thorne leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. He wasn't looking at the folders or the reports. He was looking at her. He had heard the whispers about Sarah Jenkins. He knew she could shoot. Hell, he'd read her file. She had placed in the top 10 at the International Sniper Competition in Switzerland 2 years ago, going up against active-duty military teams from a dozen countries. But to him, there was a difference between punching paper on a known distance range and doing it when someone was shooting back. "You've been here 2 weeks," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You've given us lectures on ballistics, wind formulas, and all that theoretical stuff, but I haven't seen you actually shoot since you got here." Just administrative work." Sarah felt a flicker of annoyance. "I was brought here to consult on the new optic integration, Commander, not to qualify." Thorne pushed off the doorframe and walked closer. He stopped a few feet from her, a hint of a challenge in his expression. "We're heading down to range 17 in 10 minutes. The wind just picked up. It's howling at about 15 knots, gusting to 25. Perfect conditions for the new guys to practice their Kentucky windage." "I'm sure they'll manage," Sarah replied, turning back to her desk. They'll manage, Thorne agreed. Then his tone shifted, becoming almost conversational. We've got a new target set up out there today. We pushed it way out. The boys have been trying to hit it all week. Closest anyone got was 9 feet low. They're frustrated. Sarah paused, and her hand hovering over a stack of papers. She could feel the weight of his stare on her back. It's at 4,000 meters, Thorne said casually. That got her attention. 4,000 meters. That was nearly 2.5 miles. A shot at that distance wasn't just difficult. It was a feat of physics that bordered on the impossible with standard small arms. The bullet would take nearly 10 seconds to get there. It would drop hundreds of feet during that flight. The wind didn't have to be steady. A slight shift halfway through the bullet's journey could send it whistling harmlessly into the dirt. It was a shot that required not just a shooter, but a team of spotters, advanced sensors, and a massive dose of luck. Sarah turned around. 4,000 meters? With what platform? Thorne shrugged. A customized MK-13. We've got a spotter with a high-speed wind reader. But it's the elevation and wind that's killing us. My guys are good, Jenkins, the best. But this target is breaking them. He looked at her, and for the first time, there was no condescension in his gaze. There was something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe just desperation. I've listened to your lectures for 2 weeks, he said. You talk about angles, atmospheric density, spin drift. You make it sound like an exact science. My guys are artists, and they're failing. So I'm asking you, care to give it a shot? The question hung in the air between them. Sarah looked at him, searching for the trap. Was this a hazing ritual? A chance to humiliate the female advisor in front of his men? But his eyes were serious. I'm not a SEAL commander, she said. Well, I'm just a contractor with a fancy title. If I miss, it doesn't prove anything. If you miss, Thorne countered, it proves the wind is a bigger bitch than we thought. But if you hit it, if you can show my boys that it's possible, that the math actually works, you'll have done more in one shot than you did in 2 weeks of lectures. It was a dare wrapped in a compliment. Sarah felt the familiar flutter of adrenaline in her chest. She hadn't fired a round in anger in over a year. The last time she pulled a trigger on a target this size was in a simulator. But the challenge was irresistible. It was the ultimate puzzle. She glanced at her watch, then at the clutter on the desk. It could wait. It could all wait. Range 17? She asked. A slow smile spread across Thorne's face. I'll drive. The ride out to Range 17 was a short, a bumpy affair in a dusty Humvee. Thorne drove while Sarah sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the sprawling training complex that disappeared into the haze of the high desert. The wind buffeted the vehicle, rocking it on its chassis. When we get there, Thorne said, breaking the silence, don't expect a red carpet. The guys are frustrated. They've been busting their asses. They might see you as an outsider coming in to show them up. Is that what I'm doing? Sarah asked. You're doing what I asked you to do, Thorne replied. But fair warning, they're prideful. Don't rub it in if you get lucky. Sarah didn't respond. She was already running the numbers in her head. 4,000 meters. She needed to know the exact humidity, the barometric pressure, the density altitude. She needed to know the muzzle velocity of the specific lot of ammunition they were using. Luck had nothing to do with it. The Humvee crested a small hill and pulled up to a concrete firing point overlooking a vast, empty valley. On the far side, just a tiny speck against a rocky hillside, was the target. It was an old armored personnel carrier, its hulking frame barely visible to the naked eye. Through a spotting scope, it looked small, no bigger than a grain of rice. A half-dozen SEALs were lounging around the firing point, their gear scattered on mats. They looked up as the Humvee approached, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. They were all young, fit, and cocky, the cream of the crop. As Sarah stepped out of the vehicle, a few of them exchanged glances. Thorne introduced her with a wave of his hand. This is Lieutenant Commander Jenkins. She's going to take a look at the target." One of the SEALs, a tall kid with a blonde crew cut and the name Murphy stenciled on his gear, let out a low whistle. "Ma'am, you're welcome to try, but we've burned through about 100 rounds today. That wind is a liar." Sarah walked past him without a word and approached the firing table. On it lay the Mk-13 bolt-action rifle, a massive piece of hardware chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum. It was bolted to a heavy tripod, its barrel glinting in the sun. Beside it was a tablet computer running advanced ballistic software connected to a Kestrel weather meter that was already streaming real-time data. "Show me the data," Sarah said. A spotter handed her the tablet. She scanned the numbers. Air temperature, 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure, 29.82 inches of mercury and falling. Humidity, 12%. Wind, 17 miles per hour, gusting to 24 miles per hour from a 3/4 value direction. The target distance, 4,000 meters exactly. The bullet drop at that range was calculated to be roughly 380 feet. To hit the target, she would have to aim the rifle at a point in the sky so high that the target would be hidden deep below the scope's field of view. "This is insane," she muttered, but not with doubt, with fascination. She looked through the spotting scope at the target. The APC was a rusted hulk. To hit it, she'd need to put the round through one of the viewports, a space roughly the size of a laptop screen. Anything less than a perfect hit on the armor would just be a loud noise. "She's not actually going to try, is she?" Murphy whispered to his buddy, loud enough for Sarah to hear. Sarah ignored him. She turned to Thorne. "I need the lot number on this ammo, and I need a visual reference. Is that APC sitting level?" Thorne nodded to the spotter, who flipped through a logbook. "Lot 317. Muzzle velocity is rated at 2,850, but we've been chronographing it at 2,820. Sarah took the rifle's bolt out and looked through the barrel, ensuring it was clean. She then began adjusting the scope. The scope itself was a marvel of engineering, with enough elevation adjustment to reach out to a mile, but at 4,000 meters she would need to hold over, using the scope's reticle hash marks to aim far above the target. She lay down behind the rifle, her body melting into the dirt. She pulled the stock tight into her shoulder and closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the wind on her face, feeling the rhythm of the gusts. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer Sarah Jenkins, the administrative advisor. She was the shooter. "Give me a wind call," she said. The spotter, a serious-faced man named Reynolds, peered through his high-powered scope. "Full value wind, left to right. Currently holding at 18. Just got a gust to 24. Sarah did the math in her head, cross-referencing it with the tablet. At this range, a 1 mile per hour error in wind estimation would push the bullet off target by nearly 20 feet. She had to time the shot perfectly. "I need a mark," she said. Reynolds watched the distant mirage, the heat waves distorting the air around the target. "Wind is settling. Mark. 16 miles per hour, holding steady." Sarah exhaled half a breath and held it. She had aimed the rifle so high that the target was completely out of view in her scope. She was aiming at a patch of empty blue sky above the hillside. Her finger rested on the trigger, feeling the creep of the two-stage trigger. The seconds ticked by. The other SEALs grew quiet, sensing the intensity of the moment. Thorne stood behind her, his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the target. Sarah felt the wind on her cheek. It was holding. It was steady. This was the window. She applied pressure. The rifle roared, a thunderous crack that echoed across the valley. The massive muzzle brake diverted the gases, keeping the rifle relatively flat. Sarah immediately worked the bolt, ejecting the spent casing, but she didn't look through the scope.